The colony of Haven's Reach was a strange place for a man like Daniel Cross. It was a frontier settlement on the edge of human space, where traders, explorers, and scientists worked together to build something new. But Haven's Reach was not only human. Many alien races visited, traded, and sometimes even stayed. The place was alive with languages, lights, and cultures that often clashed, but somehow managed to survive side by side. Daniel was not a soldier, nor was he an explorer. He was an engineer, a man who fixed broken machines, patched up damaged power systems, and kept water pumps running when they threatened to fail. His hands were strong and skilled, but he had never thought of himself as someone who changed the world. He only wanted to live quietly, far away from the noise of the core worlds where great powers argued about politics and wars. That evening, dark storm clouds gathered above the colony. Haven's Reach had a climate that could shift quickly. With violent winds and electric storms rolling across its wide plains, Daniel was returning from repairing a weather station on the outskirts when he saw the storm coming faster than expected. He tightened his jacket, pulled his hood low, and pushed his small transport vehicle to move quicker. But then, through the curtain of dust and lightning, he spotted something unusual. At first he thought it was just debris carried by the wind, but as he drew closer he realized it was a figure, small, struggling, and then he heard a faint cry, carried by the storm. His heart tightened. Someone was out there, and they were in danger. Daniel stopped his vehicle, jumped out, and ran toward the sound. The storm lashed at him, making it hard to see, but he finally found her, a child, no more than 10 years old, lying near a broken skimmer that had crashed against the rocks. Her skin shimmered faintly with scales of silver blue, her eyes glowing, softly even in the dark. She was not human. She was Zarathi. Daniel had seen the Zarathi before in the colony. They were tall, proud warriors, their culture steeped in honor and strength. Many humans whispered that they were difficult to deal with, always watching others with suspicion. But Daniel did not see a warrior now. He saw a frightened child struggling to breathe, pinned beneath part of the wrecked skimmer. Without hesitation, he rushed forward. "Hold on, don't move, I'll help you," he shouted, though he doubted she understood his words. Her eyes met his, wide with fear, but there was also trust in them, as if she knew he would not harm her. Daniel knelt and tried to lift the metal. It was heavy, pressing across her legs. Lightning cracked overhead, and the ground shook with the force of the storm. He strained, his muscles burning, but the wreckage did not move. He glanced back at his transport vehicle. He could leave. He could call for help and let the storm take her. But something inside him refused. She was just a child, alone, afraid. If he left now, she would die before anyone arrived. He took a deep breath, grit his teeth, and tried again. This time, he shifted the metal instead of lifting it. Piece by piece, he pushed the sharp edges away, ignoring the cuts forming on his hands. Finally, with a groan of effort, the largest piece slid free. The girl gasped as her legs came loose, though they were bruised and weak. Daniel quickly scooped her up in his arms. She was lighter than he expected, trembling, her breath uneven. The storm screamed around them, and he shielded her with his jacket as best he could, running toward his vehicle. Each step felt like a battle, but he pushed through until he reached safety. He placed her inside and started the engine. The vehicle shook under the force of the wind, but it moved forward, carrying them away from the worst of the storm. The girl's breathing was shallow, and her eyes half closed. Daniel spoke, softly, not knowing if she could understand. "Stay with me. You'll be fine. I've got you now." He remembered when his little sister had been sick years ago on Earth, and how he had sat by her bed saying almost the same words. He could not let this child slip away. At last, the storm thinned, and the lights of the colony appeared ahead. Daniel drove straight to the medical station. The doors slid open, and the staff rushed to help when they saw him carrying the child. "She's Zarathi," one of the doctors exclaimed in surprise. But Daniel only shook his head. "Doesn't matter," She's hurt. Help her." The medics placed her on a stretcher, scanning her with their equipment. Daniel stood nearby, covered in dust, his hands bleeding from cuts, his heart still racing. He watched as they treated her, stabilizing her condition. Slowly, her breathing steadied. Her eyes opened again, and she looked at him with a weak but grateful expression. For the first time, Daniel allowed himself to relax. She was safe. Hours later, as Daniel waited outside the medical station, the storm finally passed. The air was cool and quiet, the stars shining once more above Haven's Reach. He sat on the steps, exhausted, but relieved. He thought this would be the end of it. He had saved a child's life, and soon her people would come for her. That would be enough. But Daniel did not know that his life was about to change forever. For the Zarathi did not forget debts, and saving the daughter of a high-ranking warrior meant more than he could possibly imagine. Daniel Cross had not slept. He remained on the bench outside the medical station long after the storm had faded. The night air was cold, and his jacket did little to stop the chill, but he did not move. His mind replayed the storm, the broken skimmer, and the frightened eyes of the girl he had carried to safety. Inside, the doctors worked through the night. At last, the doors hissed open and a nurse stepped out. "She will live," the woman said, giving him a tired smile. "You brought her just in time. Her legs will take weeks to heal, but she is strong." Daniel nodded, relief washing through him. "Good," he said simply. He stood, intending to return to his small quarters. His part was done. The girl would go back to her family, and his life as an engineer would continue quietly. That was all he wanted. But fate had other plans. The next morning, Haven's Reach buzzed with tension. The arrival of a Zarathi ship always drew attention. Their warriors carried themselves with stern pride, and their armor gleamed like polished stone. This time was no different. A squad marched through the colony's central square, and at their head was Commander Saren, tall and powerful, her silver-blue skin glowing faintly beneath the morning sun. Her eyes, sharp as blades, searched the settlement with focus. Word spread quickly. The commander's daughter had been found after the storm. She had been saved by a human. And that human was Daniel Cross. Daniel was still at the repair docks when the Zarathi appeared. He was checking a broken pump when a shadow fell over him. He turned to see Commander Saren standing there, her guards flanking her. "You," she said, her voice steady but edged with emotion. Daniel wiped grease from his hands. "Yes? I'm Daniel Cross." Saren studied him closely. Her gaze was so intense that Daniel felt as if she could see straight through him. Finally, she spoke. "You carried my daughter from death." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "She was in trouble. I just couldn't leave her there." The commander's jaw tightened. At first, her expression was unreadable, and Daniel feared she might even be angry. He had heard stories that the Zarathi hated owing debts. Perhaps saving her daughter had shamed her. But then, from behind her, a smaller voice broke the tension. "Mother, he is the one." Daniel looked past the commander and saw the girl, Lyra, leaning on a support brace, her legs still weak, but her spirit alive. Her glowing eyes locked on him, full of gratitude. Saren placed a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Yes, Lyra. This is the human." Lyra smiled faintly. "He saved me. He did not run. He stayed." For a moment, the commander's stern mask slipped. She bent down, brushing a hand across her daughter's hair, then turned back to Daniel. Her voice was stronger now, formal and clear. "In Zarathi law, saving one of our blood is not a small act, it is binding. Life is sacred. When a life is rescued, it becomes tied to the rescuer. A bond is made that cannot be broken." Daniel frowned, unsure he understood. "I don't need anything, I just did what anyone would." But Saren shook her head firmly. "You do not understand, human. By our law, you are now part of us. You belong to Lyra, and because she belongs to me, you belong to me as well. The words struck Daniel harder than any storm. Wait, what? Belong? Her guards stirred, watching carefully, but Saren raised a hand to silence them. Do not mistake me. This is no chain, it is honor. My daughter owes you her life. That means I owe you my loyalty. From this day forward, you are not merely human. You are Zarathi kin. You walk with us, live with us, fight with us, until the bond ends, through death or through choice. Daniel's mouth went dry. He had come to Haven's Reach for a quiet life, away from politics and war. Now a warrior commander was declaring him part of her family. People in the square were already whispering, pointing. He felt the weight of 100 eyes on him. I didn't ask for this, he said softly. Lyra stepped forward, leaning on her brace. But you did not ask to save me either. You chose to. Her voice was gentle, but her words carried strength. If you had left me, I would be gone. You gave me back to my mother. That cannot be forgotten. For a moment, Daniel said nothing. He saw the sincerity in the child's eyes, the fierce pride in her mother's stance, and the watchful loyalty of the guards. Whatever this bond was, it mattered deeply to them. To refuse might not just insult Saren, it could dishonor her people. Finally, Daniel sighed. If this is your way, I won't reject it. But I'm just a man who fixes machines. I'm no warrior. I'm not. You are what you are, Saren interrupted. And that is enough. My people will judge you by your actions, not your weapons. She stepped closer, her towering presence making Daniel feel small. But then, to his surprise, she extended her arm in the Zarathi gesture of kinship, forearm to forearm. From this day, Daniel Cross, you are bound to us. My daughter is yours to protect as she is mine, and I am yours to stand beside. Daniel hesitated, then placed his arm against hers. The guards struck their weapons against the ground in unison, sealing the oath. The crowd buzzed with awe. Human had just been claimed by a Zarathi commander and her daughter. No one knew what that would mean for the colony, or for the future. Lyra's eyes shone as she whispered, "Thank you, Daniel." Daniel forced a small smile. "You're welcome. I guess I'm family now." Commander Saren's expression softened, though only slightly. "Do not worry, human. You will learn what that means." And with that, she turned, guiding her daughter back toward their ship. The guards followed, but not before glancing at Daniel, with curiosity and perhaps respect. Daniel stood frozen, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Yesterday, he had been an ordinary engineer. Today, he was bound by honor to an alien commander and her child. He had no idea what trials awaited him, but one thing was certain. His quiet life was over. Everywhere he walked in Haven's Reach, people stared. Humans whispered in surprise. That's him, the one the Zarathi commander claimed. Some looked at him with respect, others with unease, as if he had suddenly become something strange. The Zarathi, on the other hand, regarded him with mixed expressions. Some bowed their heads slightly, acknowledging the bond. Others glared, muttering that a human did not deserve such honor. Daniel wished he could go back to fixing pumps and circuits in peace. But the bond tied him to Commander Saren and her daughter Lyra, and that meant his life was no longer his own. 1. Morning? A message came. The Zarathi commanded Daniel to join them at their encampment on the outskirts of the colony. With a sigh, he put down his tools and walked there, unsure of what to expect. The Zarathi camp was like nothing he had seen before. Dozens of tall, broad-shouldered warriors trained in precise formations, their armor glinting under the sunlight. Their banners, marked with the crest of a silver flame, waved proudly in the breeze. The sound of clashing blades and shouted drills filled the air. Daniel felt completely out of place as he stepped onto the grounds in his worn jacket and dusty boots. A group of warriors paused to look at him. One of them muttered loudly, "This is the human? The one who claims our commander's bond?" Another spat on the ground. "He looks weak. Daniel swallowed hard but said nothing. He knew arguing would only make things worse. Then Commander Saren appeared. She wore her armor, polished and flawless, her posture straight as a blade. At her side was Lyra, leaning less on her brace now, her strength slowly returning. "Daniel," Saren said, her voice calm but carrying authority, "you are bound to us. That means you must learn our ways. If you are to stand as Zarathikin, you must understand honor, discipline, and strength." Daniel scratched the back of his neck. "With all respect, Commander, I'm not a soldier. I'm an engineer. I build and repair things. I don't fight." Lyra smiled softly. "But you fought the storm for me." Her words silenced him. She was right. He had fought in his own way. Saren's gaze softened just slightly. "We do not ask you to become something you are not, but if you walk among us, you must at least know how to stand without shame. My people, respect action. If they see you stumble, they will reject you. If they see you endure, they will accept you." Daniel nodded slowly. "All right. I'll try." Training began the next day. Daniel quickly discovered that Zarathi training was brutal. The warriors sparred with heavy blades, their movements sharp and disciplined. Even practice strikes rattled through his bones when he tried to block them. They ran drills until sweat poured from their scaled skin, and their voices thundered in unison with every step. Daniel, meanwhile, stumbled, gasped for breath, and dropped his practice staff more times than he could count. His arms ached, his legs felt like stone, and the jeers from watching warriors stung his pride. "Look at him," one laughed. "A child has more strength." But every time Daniel wanted to give up, he saw Lyra watching him. She sat at the edge of the field, her brace by her side, her eyes bright with encouragement. Whenever he fell, she clapped softly and said, "Get up, Daniel. You can do it." And so he got up. Again and again. His body screamed in protest, but he refused to stay down. After days of training, he began to notice small changes. He could lift the practice staff without his arms trembling. He could last longer before losing his breath. He even managed to land a single strike against a sparring partner, though he was knocked flat immediately after. The warriors laughed, but not with cruelty this time. Some nodded with faint respect. Life with the Zarathi was not only about combat. Daniel was invited to share their meals, which were hearty and filled with strange spices that burned his tongue. He listened to their songs, deep chants that told of battles won and ancestors honored. He sat by their fires at night, watching as they sharpened their blades and told stories of their people. At first, he felt like a shadow among them, always the outsider. But gradually, he noticed small changes. A warrior offered him water after training. Another showed him how to wrap his hands to avoid blisters. Lyra often sat beside him, asking questions about human machines, laughing at his simple jokes. Even Saren, who rarely smiled, sometimes gave him a nod of approval when he endured without complaint. Still, not everyone accepted him. One warrior, a tall figure named Varric, constantly challenged him. "You do not belong here," Varric sneered one evening. "Our commander honors you, but you are soft. You will bring weakness to us." Daniel clenched his fists, but tried to keep his voice steady. "I never asked for this bond, but I won't disrespect it either. I'll keep trying, whether you think I belong or not." Lyra, standing nearby, raised her chin proudly. "Daniel saved me when no one else was there. That is strength. I trust him." Varric's eyes narrowed, but he said no more. One night, as the fires burned low, Daniel sat alone, staring at the stars. Saren approached quietly, her armor removed, her presence less commanding than usual. "You are adapting," she said. Daniel chuckled tiredly. "Adapting is a nice word for stumbling. Until I fall." Saren studied him. "Strength is not in never falling. It is in always rising. My people are beginning to see that in you." Daniel looked at her, surprised by the rare softness in her tone. "Do you really think they'll ever accept me? I'm just human." Saren's eyes held his firmly. "You are bound to us, Daniel Cross. That means whether they like it or not, you are part of us, but acceptance is earned, not given. You are earning it step by step." Lyra appeared then, limping slightly but smiling brightly. She sat beside Daniel and pointed at the stars. When I was little, Mother told me that the stars are like guardians. Each one is a life that shines after it has passed. Maybe one day you will have a star too. Daniel laughed softly. I don't need a star, Lyra. I just want to keep you safe. Her eyes glowed warmly. And that is why you belong. Daniel realized then that his life had changed in ways he had never expected. He was no longer just an engineer fixing broken machines on the edge of human space. He was walking between two worlds, human and Zerathi. And though the path was hard, a part of him felt something he had never felt before. He was beginning to belong. The days in the Zerathi camp slowly began to feel familiar to Daniel Cross. Training, meals, and late-night talks with Lyra had become part of his routine. He still missed his quiet life as an engineer, but for the first time in years, he felt he was part of something larger than himself. Yet beyond the campfires and training fields, dark whispers spread across Haven's Reach. Merchants from the far trade routes brought troubling news. The Dravik swarm was moving again. The Dravik were not like the Zerathi or humans. They were a hive species. Vast numbers, relentless, and hungry. Stories said they stripped entire worlds bare, leaving nothing but silence behind. At first, the news was dismissed as rumors, but then a damaged patrol ship limped into Haven's Reach, its hull torn open by strange organic weapons. The survivors spoke with fear in their voices. The Dravik were close, too close. Daniel noticed the change almost immediately. The Zerathi warriors became sharper, their training harsher. Their commanders met late into the night, their voices low, but urgent. The humans of the colony grew nervous too. Supplies were gathered, ships prepared for possible evacuation. Fear settled over Haven's Reach like a heavy cloud. One evening, after a long day of drills, Daniel sat near the fire with Lyra. She was stronger now, walking without her brace most of the time. She gazed at the stars with a thoughtful frown. Daniel, she asked softly, have you ever seen the Dravik? He shook his head. No, but I've heard the stories, everyone has. Lyra hugged her knees. Mother fought them once long ago. She does not speak of it much, but I can see the shadow in her eyes when their name is spoken. If they come here. She trailed off, her voice uncertain. Daniel placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Then, we'll face it, together. Her glowing eyes softened. You always say that. And somehow I believe you. The next day, Commander Saren called Daniel to join a council meeting. He felt nervous as he entered the great tent, its walls lined with Zerathi banners. Inside were not only Saren and her officers, but also representatives of Haven's Reach, the human governor, several traders, and even a few alien envoys from other species. The air was thick with tension. On the table in the center lay a star, map. Red markers spread across it, showing the path of the Dravik swarm. They were moving toward the outer colonies, and Haven's Reach stood in their way. Governor Ellis, the human leader, looked pale. We cannot fight them, he said firmly. We barely have enough defenses for raiders, let alone the swarm. We must evacuate before they arrive. A murmur ran through the council. The humans nodded nervously, but the Zerathi warriors frowned. To them, retreat was shameful. One of the Zerathi captains slammed his fist on the table. If we abandon this place, the swarm will only grow bolder. They will see weakness. Better to fight and fall with honor than to crawl away like cowards. Daniel stood at the edge, silent. He was not meant to speak here. But Saren's eyes flicked to him, sharp and calculating. She had included him for a reason. Honor is nothing if all lives are lost, Governor Ellis argued. We must protect our people. We have families here, children. Children will die either way if we do nothing, Saren cut in coldly. The swarm does not stop. If Haven's Reach falls, they will move on to the next world, and the next. Only by standing together can we hope to resist them. The room fell quiet. Daniel felt the weight of the decision pressing down. Humans wanted safety. The Zerathi demanded strength. And both were right in their own way. Finally, he cleared his throat. May I say something? The Council turned to look at him, surprised. A few frowned. What right did a human engineer have to speak in such a meeting? But Saren gave a slight nod. Daniel took a deep breath. The governor is right. We can't fight them head-on. Not with our numbers. But running won't save us either. The Dravik won't stop just because we leave. They'll follow. What we need is time. If we can slow them down, hold them here long enough for reinforcements from the core to arrive, maybe we stand a chance. The governor rubbed his temples. And how do you propose we slow them down, Mr. Cross? With your toolbox? Few chuckles rose around the table, but Daniel didn't flinch. Actually, yes, I know this colony better than anyone. I know its power grids, its tunnels, its defenses. With some work, we can turn this settlement into a trap. Energy fields, collapsing structures, hidden charges. We can make Haven's Reach a place the Dravik will bleed to take. The Zarathi captain's eyes lit up. A fortress. Daniel nodded. A fortress built from everything we've got. Humans, Zarathi, and anyone else willing to fight. Not one against the other, together. Silence followed. Slowly the governor leaned back, considering. The idea was dangerous, but it carried hope where before there had been only despair. Saren broke the silence. You see, this is why I bound him. Humans think differently. They see paths we do not. His idea is bold. It may work. One by one, the council members gave reluctant nods. The decision was made. Haven's Reach would not run. It would stand. That night, Daniel sat alone outside the tent, his mind racing. He had never wanted to be in the center of such choices. He had been an ordinary man who fixed machines, but now his words had swayed warriors and governors alike. Lyra appeared beside him, sitting quietly. You spoke well, she said. Mother was proud. Daniel gave a weary smile. I don't know about proud, but I just couldn't stand the thought of everyone running while knowing the Dravik would still come. Someone has to fight. Lyra's voice was quiet but filled with conviction. And now we will. She looked at him, her eyes glowing in the starlight. Daniel, when you saved me, you gave me back my life. Now you are giving my people a chance to live too. I think maybe this is what you were meant for. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. He had never thought of himself as meant for anything. Great. But Lyra's words planted a spark of belief inside him. The storm he had once feared was nothing compared to what was coming. The Dravik swarm was on its way. And when it arrived, Daniel Cross would no longer be just an engineer. He would be part of a family, part of a people, and part of a stand that could change everything. The days that followed were filled with restless energy. Haven's Reach transformed from a quiet frontier colony into a fortress. Human engineers worked day and night to reinforce walls, bury charges, and prepare escape tunnels. Zarathi warriors patrolled in strict formation, their blades and rifles polished, their armor shining like steel under the sun. And in the middle of it all was Daniel Cross. He had no rank, no official title, but people listened to him. He knew the colony's systems better than anyone, and he worked tirelessly to set up traps, reroute power grids, and strengthen weak points in the defenses. At night, when exhaustion pressed on him, Lyra would sit beside him, bringing water or a smile. Her presence gave him strength to keep going, but no amount of preparation could fully erase the dread, because everyone knew the Dravik swarm was coming. It began at dawn, the sky lit with streaks of fire as the first wave descended. Dravik ships tore through the atmosphere, their forms jagged and organic as if they were living beasts rather than machines. Their engines screamed like voices in pain, sending chills down the spines of all who heard. The alarms blared. Incoming attack, all units to positions. Daniel rushed to the walls with the Zarathi. From the high battlements he saw the swarm, spreading across the plains like a tide of darkness. Countless figures, insect-like and armored, marched with terrifying unity. Their eyes glowed faintly and their claws gleamed in the light. Governor Ellis's voice echoed through the comms. Remember the plan. Hold your ground. The first impact shook the earth as the Dravik slammed into the outer barricades. Explosions lit the sky. Humans fired rifles from behind cover, while Zarathi warriors leapt down with blades and shields, meeting the enemy head-on. The battlefield became a storm of fire, steel, and screams. Daniel was no soldier, but he stood on the walls, directing power surges through the defense grid. "Now!" he shouted, pulling a lever. A section of the ground exploded as hidden charges went off, sending a wave of Dravik flying. The warriors roared in approval. In the thick of battle, Commander Saren fought like a storm given flesh. Her blade moved with deadly grace, cutting through, Dravik after Dravik. Every strike was precise, every motion filled with strength. She stood like an unshakable pillar, and her presence gave courage to those around her. Daniel caught glimpses of her as he rushed from one control station to another, patching systems, rerouting energy, shouting instructions. Sweat poured down his face, but he kept moving. The bond tied him here. He would not let Saren or Lyra down. Then, in the chaos, he heard Lyra's voice. "Daniel, behind you!" He spun just in time to see a Dravik climber scale the wall. Its claws slashed toward him, and for a heartbeat, fear froze him. But then training, clumsy as it had been, came back to him. He raised the staff he carried and struck with all his strength. The blow staggered the creature, buying him enough time for a Zarathi warrior to finish it with a blade. Daniel's heart pounded. He was alive. He had faced one of them, and survived. Lyra rushed to his side, her eyes wide with both fear and pride. "You see? You can fight." Daniel gave a shaky laugh. "I prefer fixing things, but maybe you're right." Hours dragged on. The Dravik pressed harder with every wave, their numbers endless. The walls cracked in places and fires burned across the colony. Humans and Zarathi fought shoulder to shoulder, sweat and blood mixing, their voices uniting in desperate shouts. At one point, the Dravik breached the southern gate. Panic threatened to spread, but Daniel raced to the power junction nearby. "Hold them for 30 seconds, he shouted. Saren appeared at his side, her blade glowing with energy. "You heard him, hold!" The warriors roared and formed a wall of shields, meeting the swarm with unyielding strength. Sparks flew as claws clashed against metal. Daniel's hands shook as he worked the controls, rerouting energy from the entire western grid. At the last second, he slammed the activation switch. A blinding surge shot through the gate's metal frame. The Dravik at the breach convulsed, shrieking as energy ripped through them. Dozens fell, smoking as the rest pulled back. The warriors cheered. Even Varek, the one who had doubted Daniel, shouted, "The human fights with fire." Daniel collapsed, against the wall, gasping for breath. He had never felt so exhausted. But when Saren placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes steady with respect, strength returned to him. "You stood," she said. "You endured." As night fell, the battle raged on. The colony glowed with fires, the air filled with smoke and ash. But though the Dravik pressed again and again, Haven's reach did not fall. Every trap Daniel set slowed them. Every wall the Zarathi defended held firm. Humans, aliens, all stood as one. In a rare moment of stillness, Daniel found himself beside Lyra again. She leaned against him, tired but unbroken. Her voice was soft, almost lost in the chaos. "You said we would face it together. You were right." Daniel looked at her, then at the warriors around them, and the humans fighting alongside them. For the first time, he truly believed it. This was more than survival. It was unity, but the battle was not yet over. From the distance came a roar louder than thunder. The ground trembled as an enormous Dravik war beast rose on the horizon, taller than the colony walls, its many limbs tearing into the earth as it advanced. The defenders froze, their cheers dying in their throats. Daniel felt fear colder than any storm sweep over him. But then Saren's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "We do not run, we do not yield, with me!" Her words reignited the fire in their hearts. The warriors raised their weapons, the humans gripped their rifles tighter, and Daniel tightened his fists. He had no idea how they would survive the HFY monster approaching, but he knew one thing. He would not leave Saren or Lyra, Not now, not ever. The trial by fire had only just begun. The ground trembled as the Dravik war beast approached. It was larger than any building in Haven's Reach, its body made of thick armored plates and glowing veins of energy. Each step cracked the earth, and its roar shook the air like thunder. For a moment silence fell across the battlefield. The smaller Dravik pulled back as if giving way to their champion. Humans and Zarathi stood frozen, staring at the monster with wide eyes. Fear crept into every heart. Daniel's mouth went dry. He had faced many dangers already, but this was beyond imagination. The creature looked unstoppable. Its massive claws could tear down walls, and its body seemed strong enough to shrug off any weapon. Saren broke the silence. She stepped forward, raising her blade high, her voice clear and sharp. "Do not fear. We are warriors. We are defenders. If this beast wants to take Haven's Reach, it must step over our bodies first." Her words lit a fire in the defenders. Zarathi warriors slammed their blades against their shields, shouting their battle cries. Human soldiers lifted their rifles with grim determination. Even Daniel, though fear squeezed his chest, felt strength rising inside him. He was not alone. They would fight together. The war beast let out another roar and charged. Its massive limbs tore into the ground as it thundered forward. "Open fire!" shouted Governor Ellis through the comms. Every cannon, rifle, and energy turret unleashed, at once. Streams of light and bullets rained on the beast. Explosions erupted across its armored hide, but the creature barely slowed. It raised a limb and smashed down onto the colony's southern wall. Stone and steel shattered under the blow. Daniel stumbled as the ground shook. Dust filled the air. The beast was already breaking through. "Daniel!" Lyra shouted, pointing to the control tower. "The power grid. If we overload the north reactors, we can channel it into the cannons. Maybe it will be enough." Daniel nodded, fear tightening his throat. "I'll need time." Saren appeared at his side. Her armor was scorched, her blade chipped, but her eyes burned with fire. "Then we buy you that time." She turned to the warriors and shouted, "With me, hold the beast back." The Zarathi charged, their war cries echoing. Humans fired from the walls, raining energy blasts and missiles onto the monster. Daniel ran. He climbed the broken stairways of the control tower, rushing past sparks, flames, and debris. Lyra stayed, with him, helping where she could. Her small hands moved across the panels, her voice steady despite the chaos. "I'll handle the auxiliary links. You focus on the main reactors." Together they worked. Daniel's fingers flew across the controls, rerouting power, forcing systems to their limit. Warning alarms blared, lights flashed red, but he kept going. Outside, the war beast smashed into the defenses again. The ground quaked with every strike. Daniel could hear the cries of warriors, the clash of weapons, the roar of the monster. His heart raced. If they failed, there would be nothing left of Haven's Reach. Lyra looked up at him, her voice calm, but firm. "We can do this, Daniel. I trust you." Her words steadied him. He nodded. "Then let's finish this." Below, Saren fought like a living storm. She leapt onto the beast's leg, her blade slicing through armored joints. Sparks and black ichor flew as she struck again and again. Other Zarathi followed her lead, climbing the monster's limbs, stabbing and slashing. The beast roared in pain and fury, thrashing to shake them off. Some warriors fell, but Saren held fast. With every strike, she bought Daniel more time. "Now, Daniel?" she shouted through the comms. "Do it!" Daniel slammed the final switch. The colony shook as power surged through the grid. The cannons glowed brighter than ever before, their barrels humming with energy. "Fire!" Daniel yelled. Beams of searing light erupted from the cannons, striking the war beast's chest. The monster screamed, a sound like grinding metal and tearing stone. Its armored plates cracked, glowing veins bursting with energy. "Again!" Daniel roared, pushing the grid past safe limits. The cannons fired once more, blasting the same wound. This time the armor shattered, leaving a burning hole in the beast's chest. Saren saw the opening. With a cry, she leapt from the beast's leg and drove her blade deep into the wound. The energy inside the creature exploded outward in a burst. of fire and light. The war beast staggered, let out one final roar, and collapsed. The ground shook like an earthquake as its massive body crashed down. For a moment, there was silence. Then cheers erupted from the defenders. Humans raised their rifles high. Sarathi slammed their blades against their shields. Haven's Reach still stood. Daniel slumped against the console, his body shaking with exhaustion. Lyra wrapped her arms around him, her eyes shining with relief. "You did it," she whispered. He gave a tired laugh. "No. We did it. All of us." The days that followed were filled with rebuilding. The Dravik swarm had been broken, their leader destroyed, and the survivors fled back into the void. Haven's Reach bore scars, but its people were alive. Daniel walked among the ruins, helping where he could. Everywhere he went, people nodded to him with respect. Humans thanked him. Sarathi warriors clapped him on the back and called him brother. He was no longer an outsider. One evening, as the sun set, Daniel stood on the walls and looked out at the horizon. Saren approached, her armor finally set aside, her face calm but strong. "You fought with courage," she said. "You held when many would have fled. My daughter lives because of you. My people live because of you. You are no longer just a human in this colony. You are one of us." Daniel lowered his eyes, humbled. "I only did what I had to." Saren shook her head. "No. You did more. You chose to stand when you could have run. That is what makes you worthy." Lyra came to his side, smiling brightly. "I told you, didn't I? We belong together. The three of us." Daniel looked at them. Saren, the warrior who had once doubted him, and Lyra, the girl whose life he had saved. In their eyes, he saw trust, respect, and something deeper. Family. For the first time since he came to this world, Daniel felt at peace. That night, as the stars stretched across the sky, Haven's Reach celebrated its survival. Fires burned in great circles, warriors sang their songs, and humans raised their voices in joy. In the center of it all stood Daniel, Saren, and Lyra. Different worlds, different blood, yet bound together by fire, battle, and choice. And though the future remained uncertain, Daniel knew one truth. Humanity had proved itself once more. Not with power alone, but with heart. The galaxy would remember.